China reels through its worst coronavirus crisis, there is more bad news. The World Bank has slashed China's growth from 4.3% to 2.7% this year. But what's alarming to the world is the situation in China. Several videos coming from the country have shown overburdened hospitals, bodies being lined up, patients dying without medical help, and worse. This has happened immediately after China relaxed a few of their inhumane curbs as a part of the zero COVID lockdown that China bragged was an example for the world. But the situation now shows how Xi Jinping and the CCP have completely failed their own people. They need to be held accountable. Let's first listen in to this first-hand account from Beijing from a Chinese woman releasing an SOS message.
今天是12月17号，我们家今天一共跑了3家医院。第一家是朝阳医院，你要想在那儿输个液，4个小时起还未必排得上你，那都是无法估计的时间。我们实在是等不起了，去的华信医院。从我爸到华信医院到输完液。死了6个，然后呢，医院那儿呢，这都是排着，住不进去医院。实在没办法，我们回来了，我们就各种找人问哪个医院还有人。晚上我又去了趟华信医院，去给我爸开药。我在那急诊里边，看见那几个老人。说白了，那就是在等死，未必到死，未必能排到他们进医院，能住上那个病床。然后我又去了民航医院，在民航医院碰见一个大叔，他就说我们就来输个液，我们是从垂杨柳医院过来的。那儿输不上液。
All right, Ambassador Suresh Goyal, former diplomat, joins us on this debate. Professor Sanjeev Bagai, Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, chairman of NEFRON and Padma Shri Award is also here with us. Mr. Vijay Kranti, China and foreign policy expert, joins us on the program as well. Sumit Peer, political commentator, here with us as well. And last but by no means the least, Mr. Sharat Kohli, senior economist, joining us on the show as well. Dr. Bagai, if I can start with you, sir, and if you can hear me. Dr. Bagai?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Dr. Bagai, what is happening in China? In your professional opinion, there was a time when China decided to tell the world a bunch of lies, that the COVID situation in their country was very, very low, and at that time the world did not believe them. Now they have the most cases anywhere in the world. This complete opposite of the situation where the world was reeling under the COVID pandemic and China was okay has been reversed now. What explains this bizarre turn of events? Is it the failure of the vaccine?
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I think there is no element of doubt that it is, inconceivable to think that China is honest. They are serial offenders. They have hid the data. They have camouflaged the investigation. They have hampered the origin investigation, either from WHO or from any international body. So obviously their credibility as far as trustworthiness is concerned is perhaps in the negative. China has failed its citizens and in fact the world on various accounts. So just allow me a couple of minutes, Vineet, so that I can spell it out in a scientific manner. The vaccines were pushed through WHO, which I felt was wrong because the vaccine efficacy to begin with the parent strain of SARS-CoV-2 was very low. Some reported 30, some reported less than 50. Come Omicron and the new sublineages, which are basically CH1, XBB, CH3.1, BQ1.1, BA2.75, BF7, and so on. These have actually caused a huge immune escape and vaccine escape. Higher risk of breakthrough infection, higher risk of reinfection. So the efficacy now of the Chinese vaccines is down to around 12 to 20%. That's substandard. Now we know for a fact that China has locked up province after province, district after district, complete military style lockdown. And this causes what we call a selective pressure on the virus. So when you suddenly open up a vulnerable partially vaccinated and practically non-boosted population into the community, this virus is going to rampage like a bushfire. We know that the new sublineages have caused a lot of changes in the virus, which have made it more susceptible to the human being, more contagious, more invasive, more lethal. No longer are the new sublineages supposed to be mild. This is not a flu. And what we are seeing now is sheer devastation. There is going to be, as reports read, more than 50-60% of the population of China being infected. They hold about 22 to 25% of the global population. Even if you take a very small, minuscule percentage as mortality, that is going to be simply catastrophic. The way forward for China really is to stop lying, get hold of vaccines which work, either the two Indian vaccines which have held the Indian community fantastically well, or indeed the mRNA vaccine. Mr. Jinping has to throw his ego into the dustbin, look after his citizens, get the bivalent vaccine or the nasal vaccine or the newer mRNA vaccines. This is not a time to be tiptoeing, trying to defend himself. He doesn't have to protect his chair. He must protect his citizens. Economy comes second for them. Now it is a stage in which they need help. They need more intellectual help. They need more moral support rather than anything else. The complete strategy from the beginning till now is wrong. The zero COVID policy is absurd, and the citizens are dying, citizens are suffering. Over to you.
Right, Ambassador Goel, this is absolutely correct that the CCP has tremendously failed in containing this pandemic. Had they adhered to these norms and these protocols in the beginning itself, then we wouldn't be in a situation like this. Had they not lied to the world, they perhaps would not have been in a situation like this. But at the same time, they have a vaccine which really doesn't work. And China seems to be too proud to beg any other country, specifically India, for a vaccine that has a larger or a better efficacy.
Vineet, what you say is completely true. It's not a question of begging India for the vaccine. They can buy the vaccine also from the USA and other countries after. Besides the vaccine being produced by Moderna, which is Indian vaccine, the facility in Pune is actually reproducing or producing the vaccine researched by Oxford, and the formula has come from them. Therefore, I think availability of the vaccine, whether it is from India or from the USA or some other country, is not in doubt. It will be available, provided they are willing to accept that their vaccine doesn't work. So the question, first of all, here is that one vaccine which they had actually developed, which they began to manufacture, which they supplied to several African countries, which they supplied practically where, please do recall that the WHO actually was the first one to recognize and to accept the Chinese vaccine and to clear it for export to the other world, which actually goes to show how creditworthy are WHO credentials themselves. If they can actually clear a vaccine without much of an investigation, it goes to show what WHO is all about. So the point is not really the availability of vaccine. Again, the Chinese strategy. If you recall the first time when the pandemic, not called pandemic at that time, when COVID was discovered, the policy adopted by China even at that time was zero COVID, and that is the policy which actually most of the countries adopted. If you remember, we actually isolated a large part of our population. The difference is that we stopped the policy when there was time. Once we had our vaccination program has been one of the most effective program in the world. We have to give credit to the government for that, for the vaccination program. Everywhere else, USA is doing it. They have gone to third or fourth booster doses, etc. China's vaccination program has failed miserably. It was only a matter of time that once they stopped the zero COVID policy, once they stopped the isolation of population, that this is going to spread. According to one report, within 90 days, 60% of the population of China is going to be affected. Now, I really, frankly speaking, knowing China, it doesn't matter to me what happens to China really. It doesn't matter. If Xi Jinping wants to endanger the whole population of the country, be that as it may. If Xi Jinping wants to really put the whole country at stake for his survival, be that as it may. My concern is that if COVID spreads in that manner in China, what is going to happen to the neighboring countries. With some clue, we have managed to really stem the tide of COVID in India. Do we have the threat of COVID spreading into India again across the borders? That is my concern. And also the concern which WHO should highlight, that from China, there are other 19 neighboring countries, Central Asian republics, Russian Federation, Myanmar, Southeast Asian nations. Are they also going to get the COVID once again? I don't think that anyone in the world has paid attention to that part of the picture. With some difficulty, the pandemic is on the recession. I hope it does not begin to spread again, because this was a single mistake made by China.
Right, absolutely, sir. Sharat Kohli, if you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, China is finding itself in a catch-22 situation, aren't they? You know, with the COVID situation basically entering its worst phase ever since the pandemic started. And on top of that, the antagonistic fervor against China is also not helping the country recover and refocus on, fixing the problem with its citizens first.
Absolutely, Vineet. I mean, I would say, Vineet, that China is now getting taste of its own medicine. What it did to the rest of the world, in 2020 or 2019 end and 2020 beginning, it is getting a taste of that medicine. And I think China is paying the price for that. Lies is in one word I can, define the policy which China has. I have personally seen videos of queues of crematorium vans outside, those hearse vans outside the crematorium. And we heard yesterday that China has its second death. A few weeks ago, I heard it had its first COVID death in this wave. I mean, what a load of rubbish this is, because you see, queues and queues of hearse vans outside the crematoriums. So they don't want to disclose. I don't know what China tries to hide. The fact of the matter now, Vineet, is that all the economic data points being shared by China with IMF, World Bank, all the international agencies, even with the New York Stock Exchange, when it comes to, I do not trust a single data point. And this is why I don't trust, because unemployment in China is rampant at this point of time. Their GDP is falling like anything. Worst, what was China's USP? Being world factory. Some of the finest names in the world had their manufacturing bases in China. And we are now witnessing a mass exodus of companies and investments from China to places like India, places like Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Bangladesh. There's a whole list of nations, which are today catching whatever is being offloaded from China. So I think China has a lot to worry right now. Unemployment, poverty, inequitable distribution of wealth, atrocious policies of the CCP. You name a vice, and that is existent in China. And on top of that, a dictatorship-based political system who's going to remain for the rest of his life. He's going to rule the country. And the fact of the matter is that 1.4 billion plus Chinese people today are against the establishment. But the only problem is you need another Tiananmen Square like revolution to be coming forward. And I think that is in the pipeline, Vineet. I'm making a very bold statement. I feel a revolution is simmering up in China. And we saw that when the zero COVID policy was launched, we saw the extent of protests which were there, which is why the government was forced to open everything. Both the policies were not correct. Neither was zero COVID correct, nor is this opening everything correct. I think a more moderate approach was required. A very selective approach was required. It has gone wrong again and again, I would say, Vineet, and it is paying the price. And this is going to convert to economic fallouts in the times to come. You will see China, what I'm forcing right now is that China might fail, China might disintegrate, and you might see a revolution happening in China, an open protest happening in China against the government, where the government is at the risk of being brought down beneath.
That's a solid statement to make, Dr. Kohli. Sumit, do you concur with what Dr. Kohli has just said, that China perhaps could be on the anvil of a revolution? Plenty of times, there have been instances where this revolution has failed and China has crushed it, has scuttled it. But this time around, it's a two-pronged problem that China has to deal with. Will they be able to survive this?
Vineet, thank you very much for having me on your show. In fact, I completely agree with Dr. Kohli. That is something which is on the cards, which was on the cards, and I have been most vocal about it without mincing my words anytime. Vineet, it was your show, it was NewsX when the Chinese vaccine was lost, 73 side effects, 34 fatal effects. The doctor died. The doctor died a mysterious death. Now, what is happening in China? Some rating agencies have rated it at 2.3. 2.7 is the World Bank, they are at 2.3. $45 trillion of debt, 320% of GDP, debt servicing cost around $1 trillion, factory output come, exports are lesser, semiconductor is on bankruptcy, real estate is on bankruptcy, they're going to default on a lot of loans, and around $15 trillion of net worth lost with the $3 trillion reserves, if that are still intact. So China's economic outlook, exports and all are going down and down. More and more sectors are conking off. Real estate conking off is $9 trillion ticket and 30% of your GDP. That is what the real estate means. With this, Vineet, China always had this economic problem because this zero COVID was always a farce. They did not want to know the world that the economy is conking off. Now tell me, the cycle of Delta is 14 days and the cycle of Omicron is 5 days. Last 10 months, they've been keeping 100 to 80 crore people in a lockdown. So either the deaths were happening, then they were not talking about it. Either the deaths are still happening and they are letting us know about it. That is what the CCP is good at. CCP is good at creating a theater, Vineet. Remember, Z went to a so-called hospital in Wuhan wearing a surgical mask. Later on, it was a set. It was like a Bollywood set which they created. Remember, PLS actors, soldiers, Chinese actors were shown as PLS soldiers. Remember, they tried to doctorate the Galwan video. Remember, they said that in Galwan nobody died, then 111 graves came up. 111 graves come up. Remember, they did this famous Wuhan pool party. Again, NewsX is saying to the world, look, we are China free. Now, if Wuhan was wrong, even this is now wrong. This cannot be right. And when Vineet, incidentally, they also told us that we have controlled the COVID with 1 lakh infections and 4,000 deaths. Now, everything what China has told so far is a complete bunk up, is absolute bullshit, I must say. Sorry to use a very absurd word. And they've been befooling the world all along. Now, the problem here is that now, if today, I'll give you data that around 29,000 people die in China in a day. That means around 1 million in a month. Now, how do we know these pictures which we are seeing, they are not locked, they are not doctored? How do we know that it is the Omicron, it's the normal deaths? Does CCP, now why would CCP do it? Because first CCP was hiding its colossal failure under zero COVID and keeping people locked down. They say, we don't have factory output, we cannot export, we don't have power, we don't have coal, we don't have shipping lines, our banks are not working, the shipping freight is 5 times, we are not able to supply the world because we have this zero COVID policy. Now, after the revolution, literally, which forced Z to pull back, now the people are out on the street, again they will default. Now what will they say? Because of this zero COVID restrictions, people are dying. That is where we are not having. Vineet, who knows what is happening in China? If Wuhan was true, this is not true. How do we know there are not a few body bugs? We don't know. Again, this lady has leaked this video because anyway, it doesn't matter to CCP if a few million people die. There are a bunch of crooks and thugs that are only interested to be in power. That is what they're all about. The Chinese economy is failing. That is the bigger news. Pehle zero COVID, now no COVID. That is the game they are going to play, but the economic condition is same. Still the emperor with no clothes wants to be the emperor. That is what is happening in China. How long can they befool the world, and how long can they fail? Can they now admit one thing, that the Chinese vaccine, I always call it the virus has failed. Now, if Chinese vaccine did not work in China, what about 60, 70 countries where it has gone and it seems to be working? How are both the contrasts true? And how did the death start happening just after, on the 12th day after you lifted the curbs? And in the meanwhile, you have the audacity to pull a Tawang. Last time in the peak of that, you did Galwan, now you did Tawang.
Yeah,
the Tawang idea was to put the force or put the pressure out of China, let people in the world focus on Tawang and do not question the Chinese economy and all colossal group of failed policies.
Let's also take a reaction from Mr. Vijay Kranti on this as well. Mr. Kranti, I hope you can hear me, sir.
Yes, sure.
So what explains this dichotomy of purpose and information? When COVID was ravaging throughout the world, China said, we don't have any. And when COVID has settled throughout the world, China has the maximum number of cases. What explains this, lack of insulation or, lack of basic concern for their own citizens?
One third thing is also there, lack of credibility. The problem with the dictatorial regimes is that, number one, they are not open to criticism. They don't accept even advice. they do what they think is right. And once they commit a mistake, what Xi Jinping has done, the only option he has is to replace it with another mistake, to hide one mistake with another mistake. And this is exactly what he has done. Had he been open in the very beginning, if suppose whether it was a deliberate running away of the virus from Wuhan or it was accidental, if this had been a very normal government, they could have immediately opened up themselves and told the world that this accident has happened, let us handle it together, and then they would have got support from everybody. They were hiding over it. They were sitting on the lid. And once it exploded, then it went out. They lost a lot of time for the rest of the world to be alerted. And the result was when after the new year of China, I think a few million people moved around to outside other countries, especially Italy, which is the center of their textile business, which they had taken over. So hundreds of thousands of Chinese who were infected, they moved to Italy, Europe, and America and other countries, and it spread. Had Xi Jinping the wisdom at that time and had warned the world that something has happened wrong, let us handle it, so things would have been much better. The world would have given all the support to China. The vaccines from all over the world would have reached there. And the scientists would have had enough time and opportunity to find the right kind of vaccines and right kind of sources. But now, because Xi Jinping has been hiding it, so it's not that the virus spread only to Italy or the rest of Europe or America or India. It was spreading at a much higher speed within China itself. And he has been again sitting over the lid, not letting the world know. And then later on, he comes with the zero COVID policy. The result was that their own camps where people were kept, closed,
Right,
even
sir.
they became breeding grounds of virus.
Sure.
And now when people finally, when they were fed up with everything and they have risen up, so there is practically a revolution, uprising of people. Now the dictator had no other choice. Now he was feeling that now his shop is going to be closed. Then he suddenly opens up. And it is another mistake, the way he has opened up. And yesterday's news is that they have allowed infected people and telling them, if you are mildly infected, you are free to go to your work. Just imagine that.
That's
this is going
strange
to be fatal for the whole economy, for
Absolutely,
the whole society. And just wait. If
That's a strange.
uprising could not throw away Xi Jinping or Communist Party, I think the next wave has a much bigger potential because this
Let's
will bring.
let's
this will
in fact
multiply the anger of people.
yeah. So we've run out of time. I'm going to take concluding thoughts from all our guests, starting with Dr. Sanjeev Bagai. Dr. Bagai, the fact of the matter is that this is also perhaps a very dangerous situation for the world. Lord knows what this virus has mutated into, and Lord knows what China is doing with it. There has to be a strict consideration of who goes into China and what comes out of China.
Yeah, Vineet, very quickly. The entire zero COVID policy of China is of zero intellect and they have zero morality. The fact here is that they have to be accountable to the world. They are not living in isolation. Either they play by the global rule book, which is a level playing field. They cannot have this kind of regime running around because they may reinfect the world altogether. This is again a time where the large 4 or 5 countries should stand together as a collaborative effort and pin China down. Either they toe the line or they be totally financially, psychologically, medically, socially, and economically isolated. Over to you.
Absolutely. Ambassador Goel?
Put the whole world at risk 2 years ago by not letting them know what the origin of the COVID virus has been, and by hiding the background. They have put the whole world at risk again by so quickly removing the zero COVID policy, first having the zero COVID and removing it the kind of manner they did. Any other country would have been held accountable at the United Nations. WHO hid the facts. I would really want to see if China can be brought to the table in the United Nations, if not the Security Council, in the General Assembly. But I'm afraid that the way China has managed or has been able to buy the votes globally, nothing is going to come out of it. China would again basically escape any kind of punishment, any kind of action, even though it's very clear that China has been after the catastrophe that the world is facing and the world has faced in the past. But we will have to basically again talk and just leave it there. Vineet.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Kohli, concluding thoughts, please.
Yeah, I would talk about on two fronts with regard to India, Vineet. I would very strictly, through your show, like to advise the government of India and the immigration officials that we do not know which variant is in China. In case our population is not found vaccinated for that variant, I think a very strict check should be imposed on the entry points so that people from China should not be allowed to enter India at any cost. And my second point I wanted to make is that China incidentally has become once again our biggest bilateral trade partner. I think it is high time that government of India should start thinking of speeding up the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, especially in the electronic section. I met some electronic industry people and they told me that some of our industries cannot survive without Chinese imported electronic components. I think that is where we need to seriously think, because I really foresee that China is spinning itself into a disaster, and this could have a rippling and a cascading effect on the Indian economy, Vineet.
All right, Sumit Peer.
Vineet, I have a couple of points to make. First thing is temporarily ban or suspend trade and travel with China, because we cannot risk a national health emergency. That is something which the things can go to. Point number two is that, Chinese told the world they had inoculated 3 billion people. Now today they are telling that 30% of the adult population is not inoculated. So what do you trust China on? How much do you trust China? Because prevention is the cure. Let's not go into finding the cure later on. Let's do the prevention. And this time around, the world should get together and make sure that the China is isolated, because what they are brewing is an economic pandemic. What the virus is, real virus is economic virus, not COVID. Before they have already infected the world with the COVID virus once. Let world to get together and prevent itself from getting infected by the economic virus or the pandemic which China is brewing for the entire world. That's the biggest threat.
All right, Mr. Kranti.
Yeah, I would make only one point, that the world has already suffered too much at the hands of Chinese belligerents, the way China has been behaving on virus. I think this is time the whole world should unite. Don't care about what UN says. The world should unite together and demand compensation for all the damage which every country has suffered in the form of lives and economy. I think this is time for the world to unite and demand compensation from China. That itself will be a great solution.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.